Is this the end of Mykhailo Mudryk's career at Stamford Bridge? I think that's probably the question many people are asking this evening after the report dropped from Matt Law in the Telegraph that Mykhailo Mudryk has been charged by the FA over doping and potentially faces a lengthy ban. We have been waiting a very long period of time to hear a follow-up from, I want to say, around early December, when this news dropped about Mykhailo Mudryk facing a lengthy ban, not able to play football. And we've been waiting for the B sample to come through, for the test to come back. And radio silence, really. He didn't feature at all, of course, for the rest of last season. And more recently, his number was given to Cole Palmer. And trying to gain information about and trying to glean kind of, is anything going on? What's the situation at Chelsea? There have just been a bunch of question marks around Mykhailo Mudryk, but I felt the longer it went on, the worse it was probably going to be for Mykhailo Mudryk. Now, I think we're going to go through all the details here, and it's best and appropriate to say, not only has Mudryk denied knowingly breaking any rules, there is a potential, as with one other example, that the length of, say, a 4-year ban could be reduced. But I think it's a very awkward situation that Chelsea find themselves in. And as I'm going to get to with kind of my main response to this, quite a sad, I think, situation for the player himself and kind of where he now sits in his career and what's happened since moving to Chelsea in 2023. So this is the big story. Chelsea winger Mudryk has been charged by the FA with doping offences and does face a lengthy ban. Matt Law explains the Ukrainian forward could be suspended for as long as 4 years under FA rules after providing a positive A sample believed to contain the prohibited performance-enhancing substance meldonium last year. Now, Mudryk was provisionally suspended while he and Chelsea waited for the results of a B sample, and the FA have now confirmed that he has been charged. FA spokesperson told The Telegraph that we can confirm that Mudryk has been charged with anti-doping rule violations alleging the presence and or use of a prohibited substance. In terms of regulations 3 and 4 of the FA's anti-doping regulations, as this is an ongoing case, we are not in a position to comment further at this time. Apparently, Mudryk has hired Morgan Sports Law to work on his case, with Chelsea also providing support. The firm also represented former Juve midfielder Paul Pogba in his appeal against a 4-year doping ban, which the Court of Arbitration for Sport later reduced to 18 months. Pogba terminated his contract at Juve and is looking for a new club after his 18-month ban ended in March. And just to explain this again, Mudryk denied knowingly breaking any rules. It was claimed that the Ukraine international tested negatively in August last year and insisted he had not changed any of his behaviour since then. So it's not a clear-cut case in the sense that full stop, there's no change to this. The ban that could go to 4 years might be lessened. So I think we've got to put that out there, that is this the final endpoint? Is this the verdict? No, it isn't. But it is the newest development in this issue. And obviously it's a negative one for Mykhailo Mudryk, because at the very least it rules out him returning to play for Chelsea anytime soon, which I think many of us anticipated. I feel like, from Chelsea point of view, my initial response when this news dropped last December was, this could be as extreme as terminating the contract to Mykhailo Mudryk if he is found guilty. Because as a club, it's a really slippery slope. And I think it's a PR one that's very difficult, because I think there's going to be natural sympathy in some ways for Mykhailo Mudryk, and I think we should get into some of that. But for the longevity and kind of future or previous examples, the most obvious one from a Chelsea point of view is Adrian Mutu, who obviously did have his contract terminated around 2003, 2004. That was a very different case, but in future, if something like this comes up and Chelsea deal with it in a different way to how they're going to deal with this, whatever way they deal with this, that could create some problems for them in the future. So I have some sympathy, obviously, for Chelsea and for any club that has to deal with this sort of situation. Also, Mudryk, if he is, completely honest about it and you believe his word, which I think, you probably should at this point, until we see further evidence, Mykhailo Mudryk, either unknowingly, by accident, has put himself in a situation where his career effectively, could be ruined completely, but at the very least is being haunted at the current moment. And this is a very young guy who moved from a country that had been invaded by Russia in 2022. A very young player, a very raw player who grew in stature, as we see in transfers nowadays, and became part of a bidding war between two major Premier League clubs. Chelsea made a massive deal of his signing, more so and quite weirdly compared to any other signing I've seen, where we were posting comps on our own Twitter account of him before he'd even been announced, bringing him out at half-time at Stamford Bridge with the Ukrainian flag. A lot of PR, a lot of bragging rights, and you can go and find my reaction to when we signed Mudryk. I was not overly positive about it because I just didn't think it was the greatest place for a guy of his age and experience to turn up at. And unfortunately, based on what I've judged on the pitch, this is the weird thing. This is, you cannot connect what's happened here, or at least I think fairly connect what's happened here with the rest of Chelsea and the criticisms you could have of Chelsea signing him. These are two separate cases, which makes it messy. However, if we're going to talk about the totality of Mudryk at Stamford Bridge, I think it is fair to say it's been a pretty awkward fit and in the main has not been a good signing for Chelsea, given what they invested on him in the January of 2023. I think the lack of quality on the ball, the lack of, I think just game intelligence. And again, this is very difficult because I do feel a lot of sympathy for the person of Mykhailo Mudryk, for a young guy. It was interesting when I was out in Wrocław, so in Poland, we got chatting with a few locals, and the first thing they asked when they knew we were Chelsea fans was about Mykhailo Mudryk. Some of them were Ukrainians who had moved to Poland. So it means a lot for this guy to be at Chelsea. It means a lot, I'm sure, for the nation of Ukraine to have a player at this current moment in their history, from a footballing point of view, to be at a major club, to maybe become a major star. And at the moment, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. So he's a young guy as well. And I think in some ways he has been thrown into the washing machine of Chelsea at times and is maybe going to be churned out, as it's been described to me, at the other end, which is a really brutal and quite horrible way to think of it. But I don't know what the solution is. Do Chelsea, who are already kind of guaranteed, I think if Mudryk kept playing for Chelsea, I think Chelsea were already guaranteed to probably make a loss on him because his performances and quality wasn't that good to begin with. But even then, where we are now, what do Chelsea do from here? Is it really brutal to terminate his contract? Is it about just staying with him and kind of, I can't imagine a scenario where Chelsea are going to wait 4 years for Mykhailo Mudryk. So it could be a Paul Pogba situation where the player himself actually gets to a situation where he terminates his own contract for the betterment of his own career. So it's a really unique but quite terrible and negative situation. I know many people who are really supportive of Mudryk, who wanted to see him do well, and I think that's understandable. I think this is a guy who, as I said, you bring up the context of him being a young guy moving to a new country, the confidence issues, but then in some ways fighting through some of that. And even, to some people before this thing dropped in December, you look at some of his performances in the Conference League especially, and there maybe was hints of a player that could grow in confidence. My assessment of him on the pitch was not that positive. I don't think I saw a player that was clearly deserving, or at least looked like a player that was going to go into another stratosphere. I think there were some major flaws with Mykhailo Mudryk as a footballer, and I have no shame saying that right now. But obviously this is a separate off-field issue. And I hope for his sake, for whatever happens, he is able to find a club in the future and is able to play football again, because that's obviously a massive thing. So those are my thoughts. That's what we have right now. I mean, I really hope for Mudryk's sake and for Chelsea's sake and just for this whole case, we aren't waiting another 10 months or so. I mean, I know it hasn't been that long, but, waiting a long period of time for something to come out that isn't exactly a complete verdict. There's still going to be a process here. I think it's got to be a lot quicker for the betterment of, it's unfair to Mudryk to basically leave him in a situation where it drags on, and he's ended up having to take up at least some of the ban that he would have got anyway. I think that is unfair. So hopefully that will be clarified. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below on this very awkward situation. But I felt it right to make a show about it, even though it is obviously quite a negative story about Mudryk, because obviously it's a big headline that dropped tonight. So thank you for watching, for listening, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.